I think we need to look at Indian society as a whole and look at population growth, like the biological fallacy. If you see that religion drives population growth, is basically not correct. Mohan Bhagwat ji saying that we need to, every child needs to have what you call 3 children, is a very, very what you call dangerous and unscientific extrapolation that he is espousing, and I do not agree with him at all. Hum panch, hamare 25. Who are these people referring to? Like, we are 5, we are 25. So I think it's definitely a dog whistle, right?
I'm Afrida Rahman Ali. RSS Sar Sanchalak Mohan Bhagwat has asked couples in India to have at least 3 children in order to ensure that the Indian society continues to survive. What did Mohan Bhagwat say exactly? Well, this was when he was speaking in Nagpur. He said that according to population science, when population growth is below 2.1, a society perishes on its own. Nobody destroys it. This 2.1 figure actually was a reference to the total fertility rate, the TFR, which is considered the replacement level of a population. That is, if every woman has 2 children, one will be a girl across population as a whole who will replace her mother and have children of her own. And that is the reason there were concerns about sustaining the population at the same level. It's a bit of a complicated concept. We'll not go into the nitty-gritties of that, but the overall issue is that Mr. Bhagwat has said the TFR should not fall below 2.1 at any cost, and humans are not born in fractions, so there is actually no 0.1%. So actually, therefore, women should have a minimum of 3 children. This has set the cat among the pigeons. It has created strong reactions. Many opposition leaders have reacted and responded to this, also saying that this is not exactly a very healthy suggestion for a country like India. Let me welcome Saira Shah Halim, politician and activist, who is also a CPM leader. Thank you, Saira. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. So let me have your response to what Mr. Mohan Bhagwat said earlier. I'll put out the quote plates as well for your reference, but please go ahead.
So good evening, Afrida. Firstly, I think Mohan Bhagwan's statement, it warrants official scrutiny now. He can't just get away making such outlandish statements, especially knowing that such statements can have, adverse implications. And I think he's used, a lot of unscientific narratives surrounding the demographic trends to even make a statement like that in full public gaze. So let's talk about how, when you address the issue of TFR, right? So let's talk about how this misinterpretation of TFR and population growth rate is happening, especially with Mohan Bhagwat is concerned. Now, what is TFR? That is the total fertility rate, okay? So now the TFR, what it does is it measures the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her entire lifetime. That means the entire puberty, say like from a woman, when a woman achieves puberty till the time of menopause, okay? The overall TFR has consistently declined over the years. So it's not that the TFR is increasing. And currently it's at 2.0 as per the NFHS report 2019 to 2021. So which is below the replacement of 2.1. So that means it is declining. So that means the population overall is stabilizing. Okay. Now, there is convergence across religious groups. That means the data reveals that the TFR amongst Muslims, 2.3 has been consistently declining at a faster rate compared to Hindus, which is 1.9. So this completely refutes the claim of this disproportionate, high population growth amongst the Muslims, as a gap between the two communities is anyway narrowing. Okay. Now,
here he is not mentioning communities at all. I mean, I agree. You were saying, you're referring to earlier statements of how the demographic imbalance is happening in Indian society due to the rate of Muslim population increasing at a higher level. You are giving me a clarification on that. But here, Mr. Bhagwat, this time at least, when he spoke last Sunday, has made no reference to community. He's saying
No,
overall, and therefore my question
no,
to you was
overall,
on the
even
overall
okay.
aspect.
So let's give him the benefit of doubt, even if he means
Okay.
overall. Okay,
Mhm.
let's talk about the economic and environmental sustainability pattern. Do you think that in an anyway overpopulated country can as Mohan Bhagwat is saying that he's not referring to any community, he's not making any statement regarding Muslims or Hindus. But again, if you look at the all societies, we have the basic same challenges, whether it's Hindu or Muslim. That is resources. There's a resource scarcity, there's a climate change, there's strain of public services. Okay, there is this growing expenses. There today we heard of double what do you call members and no kids. So in an era of dink, wherein double income, no kids. Here he is making absolutely unscientific, statements that the population is declining and, per family needs to, what do you call, have three children to counter a certain society. So I think it is a dog whistle because India's focus right now should be about improving the quality of life for all. Okay, not just merely increasing the population numbers. And a large population without adequate resources, it basically just kind of expedites in unemployment, poverty. You look at ecological degradation. So I think whatever he's claiming, whether it is on communal lines or not, because I don't know whether you've read this book by Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, The Myth of Muslim Population, right? Explosion. He's written a very erudite book. So that completely, what you call debunks myth of the Muslim population going up on numbers, and the Muslim and the Hindu population going down. So it's a very scientifically, what do you call, scientifically proven book that when you talk about polygamy, it is the tribal communities, where the polygamy rate is high compared to, what certain political segments are trying to espouse, that Muslims, are practicing polygamy and that's why they have, more and more children. And I think we need to look at Indian society as a whole and look at population growth like the biological fallacy. If you see that religion drives population growth is basically not correct, because the common denominators of population growth is poverty, illiteracy, okay, and not having the access to contraception. Okay, that is far more significant than religious identities, and that is any society that is poor, any society that is illiterate, or they don't have access to contraception will anyway increase our population. But Mohan Bhagwatji saying that we need to, every child needs to have what you call three children, is a very, very, what you call, dangerous and unscientific extrapolation that he is espousing, and I do
Right.
not agree with him at all. And if there is a communal tinge to it, then I think it's a very, very sorry state, because here the demography very clearly says how the Muslim population, whether it is, what you call, in any sector,
I
how
take
it's
your
going
point,
down.
Saira, because what you're
Yeah.
saying is fundamentally a larger and a more holistic point of view. Because, while I was doing my research, I clearly understood one critical thing, that India's demographic transition is not an impending crisis, but a challenge that requires some, strategic planning and thoughtful policies. Now, instead of resorting to simplistic calls for higher fertility, policymakers should actually be focusing on structural issues in, say, labor mobility, gender empowerment, those sort of things, which I understand you're trying to point out that, you cannot sort of have these solutions to empower our population or even for the growth of our country. Even for a moment, if we forget the Hindu Muslim, connotation, which he has not made this time, like I said. But I take your overall point that there should be a balanced and inclusive approach, and that, the demographic changes simply by increasing fertility
Afrida,
cannot achieve.
if,
Right. Did
if
I
you
get
if
you
you'll
right
allow
in
me
that?
in, if you'll allow me in, he might not have made a direct connotation to Muslim. However, he's made a call for Hindus to have more children, So it very clearly leaves out a certain community out, and he's clearly meaning that the Hindu, population should have more children. So again, making a statement like that is not only unscientific, it is also counterproductive, because it misrepresents demographic data and ignores the broader social economic realities that influence the birth rate, the fertility rates, and instead of fostering, I feel, communal, what do you call, harmony, it will just cause alarmism, between communities. And I think he should call, if he has to, he should call for equitable access to education, healthcare, economic opportunities for all communities. Again, I'm iterating. That will ensure the population growth and national progress for everybody, not just one community, that, okay, now start having 3 children. I think it is completely alarming and unscientific, whatever his claim is.
Yeah. What I will also play out what Mr. Owaisi says here, because he's reacted very strongly to the statement. It's one of the most, obviously, ideologically also opposed to the RSS, so one can understand that here is Mr. Owaisi going hammer and tongs against this statement.
आप तो हमको दिखा रहे हैं कि हम लोग रिसोर्सेज खा जाएंगे, वो खा जाएंगे. अब मोहन भगवत बोल रहे बच्चे पैदा करो, तो हम मोहन भगवत जी से पूछना चाह रहे हैं कि बच्चे पैदा करने के लिए वो क्या लोगों को देंगे, क्या कुछ देंगे? अकाउंट में डालेंगे 1500 रुपए, जो बच्चे ज्यादा पैदा करेगा उसको 1500 बढ़ के मिलेंगे. माशाल्लाह से मेरे को 6 बच्चे हैं, मैं पहले ही बोल दे रहा हूँ, फिर वो आप लोग बोलेंगे, वो पीछे से बोलेंगे वो इसलिए ऐसा बोला, और उसके 6 बच्चे. नरेंद्र मोदी के भी 6 भाई हैं, अमित शाह के भी माशाल्लाह अच्छे हैं. अब नहीं, मोहन भगवत तो जब अपने आदमी को बना रहे सीएम यहाँ पर, तो उनको बोलना चाहिए उनके आदमी को, भाई तू स्कीम निकाल ले बच्चे ज्यादा पैदा करने की. अरे बाबू, वो कब गुलाटी मारते नहीं मालूम आपको. अभी देखो, अभी बोल दिए बच्चे पैदा करो ज्यादा बोल के. कल तक तो उन्हीं के लोग बोल रहे थे मुसलमान ज्यादा पैदा कर रहे, डेमोग्राफिक चेंज हो जाएगी. ये लोग, आप झारखंड का वीडियो देखे, बीजेपी का उनका वीडियो देखे आप, झारखंड में जिसका इलेक्शन कमीशन रोक लगाया, देखे आप? देखना चाहिए आपको. उस वीडियो में बताया गया कि एक घर में हिंदू परिवार बैठा हुआ है, टेबल पे खाना आ रहा है, मियाँ बीवी है, हस्बैंड वाइफ है, 2 बच्चे हैं, और वो लोग आराम से घर में बैठे, घंटी बजती घर की, जैसा डोर खोलते एक 50-60 मुसलमान खड़े हैं पूरे, टोपी बुरखा, और अंदर घुस के टेबल पे कोई बढ़िया रहा कैसा बोले.
Yeah, he's referring to the campaign, the sort of campaign and fear mongering, as Mr. Owaisi often says, that is being created deliberately by the BJP. It's that Hindu Khatre Mein Hai narrative, which I think you are also referring to when you say that, to actually, there are undertones of that same communal narrative. Even though I insist, and that's why I played out the quotes also, that this time he has not mentioned any particular community. But having said that, Saira, the fact of the matter is that it is an issue which policymakers do discuss, because you see the productive population is of a certain age, and no country can afford to have a decline in that. When we say demographic dividend, for example, it refers to the economic advantage a country experiences when a larger share of its population is within that working age of 15 to 64 years compared to the dependent population of children and elderly. So this shift creates a potential for accelerated economic growth, provided, of course, that the workforce is educated and skilled. But Mr. Bhagwat is not wrong if he says that we need to keep up with the younger population. We cannot have a decline in the age group and dependent population numbers increase. Don't you think there is an economic factor that he is also trying to bring out here?
See, I tell you what, now there have been a lot of narratives that are floating about, because when we talk about, a country, the citizenry, it's not just about a particular community. We're looking at the census data. So if you look at the census data of, say, even if he is trying to, say that Muslim population is going down, or the Hindu population is going down, or Muslim population is increased. So we have, there have been allegations from certain right-wing forces that Muslims have been multiplying fast as an organized conspiracy. And if you look, that the Muslim birth rate is the highest and demography has changed in the last say 70 years, because now 84% Hindus has come down to 79.8%. Muslims have gone up from 9.8 to 14%. That is the narrative. However, okay, if you look at the whole census and you look at the data, there was what do you call projection. Again, I'm saying I will come to the census later. That the projection is that after 60 years there was a 4.2% increase in the Muslim population, and the projection is that in 2100 Muslims will become 18% of the population. Currently, they are, I think, about 14%. And the projection is that they'll become 18%. So now there is no question of Muslims overtaking the Hindu population, firstly, because if you look at, if you've read, there's a report by Professor Dinesh Singh, who was the former VC of Delhi University. He has studied the data, and he's very categorically said, even Mr. S.Y. Qureshi in his book, on population myth, that Muslims can never overtake the Hindus, at all. So this whole sloganeering that Hindu khatre mein hai, endangered, it is basically a fake narrative, and it seems nothing but a mischievous propaganda. For example, hum panch, hamare 25. Who are these people referring to? Okay, like we are 5, we are 25. So I think it's definitely a dog whistle, right? And I want to challenge these people who are spreading these narratives, okay, and ask them, you show me one Muslim man in India with 4 wives and 25 children, So one in a population of 1.3 billion. So I think these are just claims to, what do you call,
But
mitigate.
Saira, the good part, I think at least, that these sort of political exhortations are not going to influence reproductive behavior immediately. So much of it, let's face it, is posturing. Much of it is just rhetoric, trying to be relevant, fueling a certain narrative, which politicians or organizations like RSS are compelled to do. It's also like a professional hazard, isn't it? It's a compulsion. Do you agree with that?
See, I think overall, his call to have more children is again outrageous. The call should be that all communities should have lesser children. Look at sustainability, instead, because there are no jobs. You look at the ecological balance, you can't talk about these things, because here, if you look at, the myths, that surrounds Muslims, you look at polygamy, right? You look at, whether it is about Muslims having 4 wives. If you go down into, the statistic, you'll see that it's like tribal areas. And if you talk about polygamy, the Hindus practice more polygamy than the Muslims. So these are basically myths that need to be nipped in the bud, And, if you look at the data, that the comparative data shows that while Hindus family planning data is 54.4%, Muslims family planning data is 45.3%. Okay, then if you look at the total fertility rate among Hindus is 2.13%, right, and for Muslims is 2.61%, and Muslims are lagging due to the socioeconomic status, which is far behind the Hindus, right? So as Muslim socioeconomic profile improves, the gap will also narrow down. So it is not just the Muslim community or the religion that to be blamed. It is basically the carelessness and the indifference of the government of the day to develop the main community, to develop the Muslim community, And I think this whole media narrative should not be against the Muslims, but against the governance and against policies, which are so, kind of borderline. It is getting to be very, very community oriented. And I think, there's another myth that's floating, is that the Muslim population growth is upsetting the demographic balance in India. So right now, the demographic ratio of India shows an increase in Muslims from 9.8% in 1951 to 14.2% 2011. But this is an increase of 4.4% in the last 60 years. And then the media again talks about the decline in the Hindu population, like as Mohan Bhagwat said. Like there's been a decline, it says that from 84.2% to 79.8%. However, it doesn't talk about Muslims adopting family planning methods and the population growth, which is declining faster than the
You
Hindus.
know,
Why
I,
isn't the
I
Hindu
come
talking
from
about that?
Assam and I have seen this firsthand, and I would like to share, since you brought this up, about again a state where this narrative is used a lot. That there is an increase in the disbalance in the demography. The chief minister there has also used this narrative a lot. But what I found is access to family planning, which you just mentioned, and I'm emphasizing it. You know, when people don't have access to health care, when there isn't enough family planning measures available, and also there is a lack of education and awareness across the globe, those communities produce more children. So that is something that the government of the day is unwilling to address. I mean, they'll not talk about
Mhm.
empowering women or educating women about family planning. They will straight away look at the community ratio and talk about that, right? It's convenient to do that, but then they wouldn't make the effort to look into the educational parameters or empowerment parameters of women in that community. So this I have seen in Assam, but I want to come to you for closing comments. Before that, I want to read out some of the comments that people have commented on Mohan Bhagwat, saying this and on his quotes. And these are people, I mean, these are quotes from the citizens of this country. There's one I'm reading out which says, more kids, they say, but who's footing the bill? Parents will have to raise the kids. An average Indian earns 20 to 30K a month. I'm not sure if that figure is accurate, but here is someone who's saying, what about the price hikes? And it's not the government who's, after all, going to look after my needs. You know, here we are cheering for family planning slogans wrapped in Hindutva vibes. Maybe a middle class person is trying to budget chai pakoras, let alone raising an extra kid. I was just reading that off. So, Saira, clearly people are not amused with this suggestion. So, while, like I said, it remains you call it a dog whistle, I will say it's some sort of a political compulsion as well to stay relevant. As we close this conversation, tell me, how do you, as a leader of one of the opposition parties, counter such narratives? What is the message you take to people when something of this nature is said?
I think I think it's time that the government discusses governance, good governance, talks about healthcare, talks about education, rather than using a dog whistle to to alarm communities before electioneering. And I think there are a lot of myths here. There's an organized conspiracy by Muslims to overtake the Hindu population to capture the political power in India. That's been an ongoing kind of conspiracy for a very, very long time. And you tell me, or you cite one leader or one Islamic scholar or a cleric that has asked Muslims to produce more children to overtake the Hindu population. That is next to impossible, right? And here there's another myth that Muslims are polygamous in nature because the religion permits them to have more than one wife, right? But however, a government study in 1975, okay, clearly found that polygamy is present in all communities in India. Among them, Muslims are the least polygamous. This is again a myth-breaking statement. And Muslim polygamy per se is also statistically not possible in India. As the gender ratio, if you look at, there are only 924 women for 1,000 men, right? So that does not permit it. The statistics don't permit it. However, again, I'm iterating that polygamy is related to the economic wealth of a man who can afford more women. And where is the wealth? Now, Muslims here, if you look at majority Muslim India, they live, if you look at the such a committee report, their socio-economic condition is far worse than, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, or even the Dalits, right? So they are so poor, they can't even afford one wife. Where is this whole, this narrative of having more than, three wives or whatever? So instead of highlighting which Hindu communities are more polygamous, the media is constantly taking a dig, describing the Muslim community as polygamous. So I think it's time that we talk about, growth for all, education for all, healthcare for all. We need to look at the ecological balance. We need to do away with the pollution. We need to look at better things like education and jobs, right? And concentrating on the GDP. Then telling a community, now you need to counter this thing and you need to have more children. I think it is highly reprehensible that a leader like Mohan Bhagwat had to resort to such gimmicks.
Right. Saira Shah Halim, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you on this topic.
Thank you so much.